Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of the Opus 15 set review. I've got Jared with me here again. Jared, thanks for coming on, sir.
Hey.
Alright, well let's get right into it, right? We'll start with Earth, and I believe our first card is Vanille. Really what I thought of when I saw this card was it's kind of like a Minfilia, the Opus 6 legend, but you lose the flexibility of being able to get characters, you have to get forwards, but you gain the flexibility of you could break a dull forward instead, which also kind of makes me think, well, what about Prompto? But I don't know. Would you ever use Vanille over Minfilia?
No, not really. I think basically you have to get forwards means that it's dead a lot more of the time on turn 1, so it's often not as good as Minfilia. Even if it's like close, and then breaking it all forward is just like it's not something you're ever like happy to do with your backups. Like we have cards that do this. It's like Masked Woman and you know like Prompto. Like I don't know why I would ever want to play this card over Prompto. It doesn't hit the sweet spot of being in between. Instead of characters, I could see it hitting the sweet spot. You know, like maybe you play one of this or whatever, but it's not making it in any like mono earth deck. The only way that I could see playing this is like splitting up. If you play multiple Minfilias in Verstale deck, then you play one Vanille and one Minfilia instead of like the two Minfilias now, so that you could potentially not have as many problems there. But I think it's just very, very outdated. It's definitely got the common rarity syndrome on it. Probably playable as just like a generic TCB backup in like L3, L6, but outside of that, I don't think we're gonna see it.
That's fair. Here we have Scholar. It's a cute effect and it's unique. This is a little too like off and weird for me. How do you feel about it?
They like put they made a bunch of like synergies where like you have to get something out of your deck, right? So like Guy gets one of the rebels out of deck, and there's enough for Guy, but like fast forward to a few cards to the Gilgamesh we're looking at, where like you have to get a Gilgamesh from your deck, but you can only play 3 Gilgamesh, and then like the Gilgameshes get out. So like having a way to like keep your synergies in place is kind of like something that, as like one of these like niche combo meme deck players, is nice. Like it's very, very nice that like I never have to build a deck with Gilgamesh and say, well, if I draw 2 Gilgamesh, my deck doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like it's just like not. It's one of those things that like we never had a way to do that at all in the game before, and now with this, we're just like, okay, well at least I have one way to kind of fix that problem, right? And is that competitive? You know, probably not. But like, it's one of those things that I'm glad exists in the game, and I think it'd be good if we saw more of these kinds of things, where it's like, well, we can't let people put cards back into their deck because games are going to take forever. They already take forever as is. And so like we can't let it go longer. But at the same time, we want these cards to work. So like, okay, we let them put back one card and then they get to mill a card. So yeah, I think that's a good like middle ground, and I'm glad that this kind of thing exists in the game.
Good insight. I like that. I don't care about this Galuf at all unless you're desperate for crystals.
It's so awful. You have to damage the forward.
Yeah, that's bad. But here's Gijuk. Again, kind of similar thing about all the headhunters. This one is your searcher, which is always good. So again, if headhunters are good, you're going to play this. If not, then we have Gilgamesh, a card I actually kind of warmed up to the more I read it. Because at first I was like, wait, what? But the more I read it, if you get to damage 5, like sometimes I always forget with damage that the damage triggers stack. So if you're on damage 5, you get both effects. Mm-hmm. And so if you get to that point, he's definitely got some cool stuff. Obviously, he's got to at least live a turn if you want to use his self, dull, and break. But beyond that, I mean, they probably don't really want to kill this thing if you're on the higher damage. So I don't know. I kind of wondered if I underestimate him a little bit, and maybe if he's got a higher ceiling than I realized.
Yeah, I think this card is kind of it looks like something like things that we've seen before, where it's like sack yourself to do something useful, right? But it's like conditional or whatever. So like Gilgamesh, the Legend Gilgamesh 5 was like sack itself. You can like nail it basically. You sack itself when it's targeted or whatever to kill your opponent's thing, so that your opponent kind of like never comes out ahead on the exchange. I think it's kind of also it's kind of got that like that same energy where it's like, okay, it's fine, you know, like it's whatever. Yeah. I think the big difference is that, well, this one is cheaper, and this one gets a new copy of itself when it sacks itself, right? So a lot of the problems with the cards that like want to die is they can't kill themselves, so you have to play Magic Pot or whatever, right? This card wants to die and it can kill itself, right? And that's like kind of like the nice sweet spot that we didn't have before. Really interesting about this card is that it's in Earth, so you can play it with Regis, and that makes it like really really appealing. You know, you can sack it off to Kefka and then Regis it back and get another Gilgamesh and then sack itself off, get a Gilgamesh from your deck, trigger the abilities, then sack it off to Kefka, or you know, kill it with Ursula or whatever, and then Regis it back, and then try to like capitalize on the effect multiple times in ways that we weren't able to before. And Regis is always, you know, best friends with anybody who can kill themselves. So yeah, great synergy there. The big gate here is the damage 3, the damage 5. Are you really going to have any Gilgameshes left in your deck by the time you're on damage 3 and 5? Maybe. And I don't think it's particularly... It doesn't look particularly great against, like, you know, Mashri and exactly, I guess, and like Dull Freeze, because then he's not going to be able to... He's going to get bounced before he can use his effect, or he's going to get Dull Frozen and then he can't use his effect. That being said, Earth has a lot of ways to like prevent your stuff from getting Dull Frozen, and you can like Hecatoncheir it to like force it to fight something else, and that makes it like once you get to that damage 3, damage 5 threshold, the question is like, is it worth the slots? Is it worth like playing for? Yeah, maybe not. I'm still really excited to build with it. It's still really cool, but it is a little bit of an uphill battle for this one, I think.
I'm glad you mentioned Regis. Earth, Lightning Regis deck coming in hot for me, because there's another card we're going to talk about soon that already was making me think of Earth Lightning, but that's cool. So move on from Gilgamesh. Cait Sith, it's a cute idea, but it's so specific. Like it's one of those. It's just hard to ever see it lining up.
Yeah, you gotta play it onto the field as a backup, and then you gotta play backups to discard it. So you have to be playing a normal deck. But like, nowadays, what normal deck has the room to play something like this? They just don't exist. L3, L6, probably way better there. Something to note that I didn't... Every time I see it, I'm like confused, is it's not a standard unit. For some reason, it's a Master Artificer job with no multiplay, so you probably only play one of it when you do, but... It's potentially playable as a one-of in some other smaller formats. Definitely this is like a cube all-star. I'm gonna put this in like every single EDH deck, every single cube I ever make. It's gonna be awesome there. But
all right, moving on, we got Cait Sith. I didn't actually think much of this card when I first saw it, because for whatever reason I was like, well, it's a worse Suzuhiza. You know, Suzuhiza is going to much more reliably get me 2 cards. But this one, the fact that it has a burst, it only hits forwards, but I don't know. I feel like this is one of those cards that, like, I think what's on the card itself is actually good. I think it would be hurt by deck slots. Like, what are you going to take out of your decks to put this in?
I agree. So in Opus 14, I played a lot of monks, no secret there. In that deck, there was like, there's always this one slot that I could just never figure out what I wanted to do with it, because everything sucked. No matter what I put in there, it just sucked. Like, you could put the monk, an extra monk 5 in there, an extra monk 3 in there. You could put Vanille. I tried Shadow Lord, Seraphy. Like, I tried like everything under the sun, and they're all bad. This is what I wanted to put in that slot. It's just like a very cheap, like, cantrippy style card that just was a body that I could put out and buff Sophie for 2k or, you know, whatever. And I think in that sense, this card is awesome. This card is actually really underspoken, I think, how efficient this is. Earth is not very good at digging for stuff. And so, like, the only ways that you really have are Cid Garland. You don't have a lot of inherent draw. You only have, like, Cid Garland and search effects, right?
Yeah.
So, like, when you actually want to keep digging for more stuff, I think this is perfect. Will this get the slot in monks? Probably 0 to 1 is what I'm guessing. For other Earth decks, I think you could play up to 2, depending on how many forwards you're playing. And I think we did the math on this one the other day. And I think if you play like 24 or like 25-ish forwards, this has like around a 75 to 80% chance of hitting on turn 1. So you're going to have to compound the math whenever you draw more forwards versus more backups. But if you play like around half of your deck as forwards, this is really, really consistent. So I just... on a burst especially, this card is really underspoken as one of the better Earth cards in the set, I think.
Nice. Good ring-in endorsement there of Cait Sith. I wonder if you'll feel that way about Kefka. I like this art, man. I like this character from 6, but this one, it's just Crystal Syndrome. Like, okay, you get one when you enter, great, but to use his only effect, to make him not a blank card, you need 3 whole crystals, and even then, like, I'll mention this about our Dark Legend when we get there, but anytime you have an effect that lets your opponent choose, like, what the least bad option for them is, I've never found those cards to be very good, so I like this artwork, but I do not like this Kefka.
This card doesn't passively generate the value. That's the big difference here. There's no it's not passively giving you crystals any turn. It literally does nothing once it enters besides give you the crystal. And as I said earlier, crystals are kind of not CP until you spend them. So this is actually just a 4 CP AK, in my opinion. So I think that this card is unplayable, basically. I think if we ever get to the point where, like, in like a mono earth or a deck that would want to play Kefka, if like half of the cards in your deck are giving you crystals, then maybe this is like playable. But like right now, when crystal generation is just like absolutely like sparse and you're like struggling to get to 2 crystals a lot of the time, and in mono you literally can't even get enough crystals to make Robel-Akbel work, there's just no way in hell you're ever resolving the 3 crystal effects profitably. And even when you do, maybe it kills 2 things, maybe it doesn't. Like, if you got to kill your opponent's like backups and stuff like that, I would get it. Like, sure, there's the dream there, but like it's only forwards. This card is just no good. Yeah. Maybe in the future there's something there.
Yep. Next we have Cid Sophiar, which to me the most surprising thing was I didn't even know he had a last name. I thought he was a Cid. They're all just called Cid. Again, this is another one of those cute effects of like make them lose their special keyword. However, in this case, he actually steals it and gives it to someone else. You can even use it on your own forwards. I didn't realize that at first, but so like you could have a hasted forward go in, siphon that from them, give it to another one. Stuff like that is like, I don't know, that sounds like too much work for not enough payoff for me, but I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if there's also some like stupid goofy combo you can do with that somewhere. So
yeah, I think that basically sums it up. Stupid goofy combo. There's probably going to be some stuff with like Lady Lilith haste your lightning forward, you swing with the lightning forward, then you transfer it to a non-lightning forward, so you like transfer haste kind of thing.
Yeah.
And lets you double up, which is pretty neat. And Earth Lightning it kind of has like a lot of stuff going for it that we want to take a look at it again this set. So probably look there. But also, just one very, very small thing about this card is it's a 2 CP Earth backup engineer. So that's another engineer for Cid Highwind, and so that's something else to look for going forward. I'm sure it'll see play in whatever engineer deck people are interested in playing, regardless, just for its job alone. And then maybe there's going to be some fun stuff going on with the category 15 or the haste combos energy as well.
Do you hear that? Is that Batman? Justice. No, but it is the Dark Knight. It's actually Cecil instead. I was really excited when I saw this card, but I also was like, well, again, we didn't really know what the crystal generation was going to be like. And now that I see the crystal generation, or kind of the lack thereof it, I'm a little less high on this guy. And the more I read his effects, like Soul Eater is undoubtedly a cool special, and maybe he'll be really interesting in title, but I don't know. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to deal yourself a point of damage, he's a really self-weight, but he doesn't get the fight that the Opus, 13 Cecil got. So I don't know. I've kind of gone down on this guy since the full set got revealed.
I kind of see both sides of this one. I've heard 2 like very extreme opinions about this card, which is like one of the, oh man, this is awesome. This is like the best Cecil. This is so good. This is exactly what we needed. It even deals you a point of damage for monks, blah, blah, blah. And then I've heard this card is a trap. This card is unplayable. Please don't put this in your deck. And I think the truth is kind of in between. I don't think that. So for the monks use case scenario, it's just a 3 CP 9K. Nothing else matters. Right? You're never gonna resolve any of the other techs if you're ever playing it in that deck, which means it's probably just worse than the other Cecil from Opus 13.
Yeah.
Probably worse than that one. On the other hand, there is some other category 4 synergy going on with the Rydia that we'll get to. And so if you're playing like, a Rydia deck and you want to play a big density of category 4 characters to get those growth counters on her, chances are you're playing a lot of summons. And then if you're doing that, you probably have few forwards. But the few forwards that you do have probably want to give her the growth counters. And so in that regards, maybe you play a lot of Cecils. And so if you are playing a lot of Cecils, then you can generate value off of the auto ability more. You can use the S ability more, and that helps you put in more damage, which means it's okay to play less forwards. So there's some in between there. Am I really sold on this card? No. Do I see the potential, and is it like possible that it has some unseen, like kind of hidden use cases, especially with Rydia? Yeah, I definitely think that it could be one of the underdog cards going into the set.
Those 4 characters, they love to stick together. This next card is Zombie. It's just awful monster. That set, move right past that. Titan, a card I misread at first because I thought it said 1,000 power. I was like, 1,000 power? That's nothing, but it actually says 10,000 power. So that's quite substantial.
Big buff.
Yeah, big buff. And then the damage is kind of funny. It just has Brynhilder's effect of 7,000. So kind of all these ones, like, I mean, the 10,000's nothing to sneeze at, but again, like, that's really more of a combat trick, and like you said, those don't really matter right now, so I don't really care for this card too much.
Yeah, this is another one of those, like, okay, would I play it if it cost 1? And I think the answer is probably yes for this one, where it was no for the win one. Give my Sophie 10k? Okay, you know, like, I would probably be on board for a 1 CP summon that just did. But this also brings up a kind of a thought experiment here. How much power would a forward have to gain for us to want to play this at 3 cost? Like, what if it said gain 20k? Would we play it? Does it matter? Like,
because it doesn't. Yeah, because the 10 is the 10 is already so over what generally matters that that's going to be irrelevant.
So if it says gain infinite power, does it even matter? I don't even think it matters, basically. So yeah, I just think that gaining power is probably just not good enough, even at 3 at 3. The flexibility is nice. It's nothing to sneeze at. Again, maybe when we get, when we're swimming in crystals, when everybody has all the crystal generators and we're playing Mono Earth, having this as a nice flexible power buff and removal is going to be good enough. For now, crystals are just too expensive to come by, and 3 is too much to pay for this kind of effect. So I don't think it's quite there yet.
By the way, the answer to that thought experiment is a picture of Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars saying, "Unlimited power."
Yeah.
That's how much power you need. Hey, look who's back. It's Category 6, so Dadaluma has returned. It's funny, I saw someone be like, well, this is what he always should have been in the first place. I think this is still a little off the mark of what he always should have been, because I think the common expression was that he should have only triggered if he receives damage from your opponent. It was the fact that you could self-ping him with Cactar that made him so silly.
Yeah.
But this one's not quite there. Like, he has to be, because he has to be dealt damage by a forward specifically. That's what makes me not like him. If he was just a more modified version of the old one, I don't know. Because basically, so what? They're gonna have to Hecatoncheir you, or you're gonna block in combat? I don't know. Am I missing a mark on this guy?
Well, I think it's basic. So if you just want to play big dudes, Earth the deck, and you make this guy 8k, 9k, 10k with buff abilities, and his own damage 3 is going to give him +2 and stuff like that, and then you play all the Hecatoncheir 2s and all the fight effects, then you're going to get some good value out of this guy, which is probably what Dadaluma in Opus 4 should have done. They should have been you should probably use this with the fight abilities, guys, and control the board with this card. So I think that this card is severely underpowered for the current time. If it just said dealt damage, there would be a niche one of use case. Then there could be something. So if you could ping him with your own Cactars, then we would still use him in that regard. If he was dealt damage by your opponent's backups, maybe we could play one of him. If he triggered when your opponent targeted him, then we would still probably play this card. But only dealt damage and only by a forward means that it's just not quite playable enough. It's not there. I think if they could just have gone back in time and swapped this Dadaluma with the old one, and then we would get the new Dadaluma, and then we would be excited for that card. We would still probably want to play it now. So I wish they did that, but they can't. So we got this piece of crap.
See you, bud. This next card's technically fodder, but man, is it adorable. I adore this little cute. He looks so cute, the Berserker outfit. I don't even know which of the 3 that is. Or no, that's from 5. See, I'm not sure which of the 4 it is.
Which the 4 is.
I will say this, even though you would, in Limited, of all the Berserker cards they've ever released, which most of them were terrible, most of them kill themselves when they attack, this one at least is just positive. When it attacks, it at least makes it so it's going to win. So of all the Berserkers, I actually do like this one the best.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna make somebody's gonna make the Berserker onesie and then wear that to Final Fantasy events from now on. Waiting for that one.
Yeah, highly approve. Okay, so here's our payoff to the Headhunters. Bagaman. Again, kind of similar to what I said. He's going to be one of your engines, get all the counters. Yep. I haven't seen them in practice enough to say yes, they are good or not, but if they're going to be good, he's going to be a part of your package.
Yep, and he breaks characters is probably the big one there instead of forwards. So, good in the aggro matchups, good in the econ matchups. If this is definitely one to look out for, like when L3 rolls back around, Headhunters with this card seems pretty solid.
Yep. Next we have Geomancer. He's our Earth Crystal Generator. We'll go past him. Here we have Firion. Why is this Firion? Didn't we get a Fire Legend? Why is it? Eureka, why is there Earth Firion here?
Yeah, that's a great question.
All right, and we don't have an answer, so let's move on. So next we have, this is an interesting one. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this. Hecatoncheir, 5-cost summon. In the past, summons that say you can only cast this during your turn generally don't see a lot of play because, at least to me, that kind of defeats the purpose of a summon is like, you want to be able to interact, you want to be able to do it on their turn. That said, it's another big board ping. I won't lie, when I first saw this, I was just kind of mad because I was like, why does Earth get this? Earth has Shantoto. Earth has board wipes. Why did Earth get another big board hit? Like, God, I would have loved to have seen something like this in Lightning or just Ice or some other element. So at the same time, in an aggro meta, maybe the more board wipes, the better. So I've kind of waffled on this one. I'm not sure how to feel about it. How do you see Hecatoncheir?
A welcome addition to the aggro metagame. I think Monks was the best archetype at combating aggro in the game because your strategy is inherently anti-aggro, right? Like you play, your opponent damages you, and then you get to explode onto the board and make a bunch of stuff. And you have access to Titan and Shantoto, like the best wipes in the game, and Mist Dragon in the anti-meta perspective, and you have all of these recursion effects, so your deck is like super consistent, right? Besides like getting the backups and playing them into the field. So I've heard a lot of people talk about it like, well, Hecatoncheir is just useless when Earth has all of these board wipes already. And I think that's kind of a little misleaded. You really just want more variety, right? Like there's so many boards when like turn 1 versus turn 1, turn 2 versus Doga, like the Sophie is already 10k, and if you Titan, it's just not enough. You need Shantoto or a bust. And I think the extra variety in how the board wipe functions, and like this one deals damage, whereas like Titan breaks them and stuff like that, right? And Shantoto removes them, and like the way that works means that like the Hecatoncheir is going to work against some board states that Titan doesn't work against.
Yeah.
Just Shantoto is always going to be the best one. It's just like very straightforward, always the best one.
Especially because
you can only you can only play, one Shantoto per game in Monks or whatever. Like if you sack your own Shantoto, you can play more. If you Althea, you can play more. But like in Mono Earth and a lot of other archetypes that aren't sacking their own backups, you can only ever play one Shantoto. Having more variety and having like it spread out among more cards is always going to be useful, I think. And I think that this card is definitely going in Monks. I think it's definitely going to go in a lot of different Earth/X archetypes like Earth Fire. I think it can go in there. And I think very importantly, this card is searchable off of the backup Rydia. So you really only have to play one if you play the Rydia, and then you have the same consistent access as you would with 2. So yeah, I think it's a welcome addition. Is it like super meta warping? Probably not, but it's definitely a nice buffer for these defensive strategies to continue and possibly be better at combating aggro.
Yeah, love the art. It's nice. We'll see where it goes.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a great full art.
So this next one, we've got our Earth Legend Rydia, beautiful mono art. So I'm hoping that the fact that
I have some bad news.
yeah, you're probably gonna. Well, nonetheless, I'll just say it. I'm hoping that the fact that it's restricted by 4 characters will help keep it in check. However, I mean, just the fact that these growth counters don't disappear. I mean, like, thank God you can only use that action ability once per turn because, oh man, just the thought of people just like, I'm gonna just start casting summons for free. I'll do it on my turn. I'll do it on your turn. And then, like Garland from the last set, I think Chris Matisky said this best when this was spoiled as card of the week, was like, I really wish they would just stop slapping that protection text. Because if it didn't have that, I don't think I'd actually mind, like, oh, well, you know, it's a 5K, easy enough to get rid of. But no, you can't get rid of it via damage. So, like, Jared, what do you think?
I got some bad news for you, buddy. Yeah. It's a grim future. All hail Doga. This is the next evolution of that deck. I'm very, very convinced on this. I've already made lists. I've already played games with it. It's already nuts. Like, it's you play the Rydia, and on her own, like, sure, it's just, you know, a free Cait Sith, a free Golem, a free Cuchulainn. You know, you get to cantrip or whatever, right? As soon as that hits 4, everything goes out the window. The whole shebang is up. You know, you never have to pay CP for summons anymore. It's like everything is just a matter of what card you have in hand at what time. And I thought, you know, okay, well, maybe it'll be hard to get, you know, those 4 growth counters. You only get 2 when she comes in.
Yeah.
You play Leonora, there's the new Porum, so you can actually just make a backup lineup in Doga that you play, you know, 5 back. You play like 1 Sarah, 1 Kolka, and then like 4 backups. You can play Leonora, there's Cecil, there's Porum if you want to play the backup Porum as well. There's like so many good ways to do that. Yeah, you play Luca, and then on the forward lineup you have Porums and Ursula, and that's just like more than enough to get it going. And if you ever open Rydia and a 4 character, and any 4 character in the deck works, you can play Porum, you can play any of the backups, they're all 2 CP. You can just go Rydia you get the 4 growth counters, and you can play Mind Flayer or Sildra or whatever it is you really want on turn 1. And it's so like before the Doga deck, it really just wanted to play backups or it wanted to play Doga on turn 1, right? And now you have this new pattern. They have a new turn 1 they can do at basically no deck building cost, and it's very, very strong. Alex is the one who really sold me on Mind Flayer here, but yeah, when you can cast Mind Flayer for free on turn 1, it's good. Like, it's just actually good in that specific situation. I didn't think like playing Mind Flayer would be like great, but it's basically guaranteed value. Sildra is obviously the best 4-drop to cast there, but yeah, Mind Flayer is absolutely fantastic. And at the risk of being a little doomsay here, now Doga really can just play Amaterasu. Like, you don't have to, like, you don't have to play Garnet. It's not that hard anymore. You just play Rydia, and then if you really want, you can just put Amaterasu in the deck, and there's just like no cost to it basically. The only cost is that it's coming at different summons out of your deck. So I'm sure that we're gonna see some of that. I'm sure it's going to be very good. This card is fantastic in Doga. Now I want to take a quick second and just talk about this deck outside of Doga. Outside of Doga, I think this card is still absolutely fantastic. You can play it in Earth Wind. You know, it works really well with Chocobo, with Ashura, with Cait Sith. And then if you get the 4th growth counters, you can play Alexander for free, Mist Dragon for free. You know, it's great there. It's very solid in Monks. I don't know if I would be playing, you know, 2 or 3 of it in Monks, but as it is, we just don't play that many summons. You know, you play a couple of Cait Siths, a couple of Mist Dragons, you know, Hecatoncheir if you want it, Vayne if you want it, Carbuncle if you want it, that kind of thing. So Rydia doesn't have the most targets there, but just as a sticky 2-drop forward that sometimes gets you value, that's just good enough in Monks there. And Ursula can get it to 4 very easily, and Yang and Cecil are in that deck too, so it's very easy to get it to 4. You can also play it in its own deck. Like, if you don't want to play Doga, but you want to play like this cool summon deck, you can play Rydia in like a 4 deck and make a deck with the Cecils, and then you can play like Phoenix, Chocobo, like all the rainbow summons that you want. Mind Flayer, Sildra, you can play Amaterasu, you can play Mist Dragon, you can play Alexander, Diablos. Like, you can just play all of these, and then as long as all of your summons are under 4, Rydia is basically guaranteed to be able to cast them. So as long as you can play your cards to the field, it's fine. You can play it as a mono Earth or an Earth Water. It's very, very solid.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. Doga's here to stay again. Well, now that I'm thoroughly depressed, let's move on to our second Earth legend in Robel-Akbel. Cool little art. I love the way this guy looks. again, one that I was so excited when I saw it, because I was just like, whoa, just break any forward or monster on entry. That's really strong. But again, you got to have that crystal. So that being said, the second effect's really interesting too, of recurring backups. And I think Alex Hancock's kind of mentioned this, an idea of like using him with the X-Death backup that we got last set, and just recurring that and then using the Void special over and over again. So he seems like a neat card. I definitely want to try him. I wonder if he'll feel really bad without that crystal, probably, because that means he doesn't do anything until the next turn. So, man, how much is that crystal going to hold him back? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think right now, this card, I've played a bit. I haven't played Earth Lightning crystals, but Lightning is better at generating crystals than Earth, so you're definitely going to have to mix it with another color, first of all. It's not possible to play it in mono right now. But I played some Earth Water crystals with the 6 package in this card. This card has just been fantastic. It's just been great. Oh, wow. I was a little doom and gloom on it because I was like, oh man, I can just never get crystals, and then this card never does anything, right? But it turns out you can just not play it when that happens. As long as you're playing enough crystal generators, he's going to be live enough that it's just solid. And it just says 4 CP, 8k, answer, kill a thing, and then if your opponent doesn't kill it, sometimes you get some value back.
Yeah.
And I found like you don't really have to get the backup back for him to feel good. You just play the 4 and kill something. And then as the game continues, if your opponent like doesn't kill him, he can run away with drawing you, with getting the backup back, basically drawing you extra cards. I've played a few games with him, and like one game he drew, I just never played him. Like one game I played him for the crystal thing, and my opponent had to kill him. And then one game I played him, did the crystal, and I got like 3 or 4 backups back with his effect before he got taken care of, and it was just great. It was fantastic. Basically soloed the game. So yeah, I think I was a little doom and gloom on like how crystals work, but this card specifically, it just has the right mix of effects going for it, and it's in the right color, I think, to really make use of crystals, and it really makes you want to play crystal generation. If it's going to be good, it's with this card, I think.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Well, that's the end of Earth, which means we didn't get Gladiolus, Ignis, and Prompto, but I'll get to that later. Yeah. So let's move to Lightning. You wanted to talk about crystal generation. Here we've got Aquila, who anytime you cast a summon, you're going to get a crystal, and then a damage 3. Like at first I thought, oh man, do you play this with the Primal Ramu, because he's all about your lightning summons? Like, I mean, if like you said, Lightning has a lot of crystal generation, so I guess if you're really wanting that, this is a card you could lean into for that.
So Lightning's crystal generation is probably like the worst one, I think, actually, because like a lot of the other ones, like the 2-drop one, I can't remember his name, but he is going to get you crystals, like once you're on damage 3, he'll get you crystals by himself, and then he also passively generates crystals as time goes on. Lady Lilith can kind of like Ursula combat trick your forwards removed from play to generate crystals. So I think this is probably the worst one, but it's still a lot better than most of the other ones in the set, I think. So I think where I would expect to see this card, if we see it at all, is Ice Lightning Summons. Kind of looks interesting with the Odins and Terra. So making use of like the summon deck that Ice Lightning wants to be. And here you could generate, so while you're generating advantage with Terra's auto ability every time you cast a summon, you can also get a crystal every time you cast a summon, and then you can use the crystals for snow or for whatever it is, and kind of generate advantage very slowly and passively that way. That being said, I think without the damage 3 ability, this card looks kind of like lackluster. I don't know if I would ever really be content with slotting it in the deck if I don't get to recur a lightning summon in my break zone. So that being said, great synergy with Odin. A good one to have in the bank, I think.
All right. Well, now we're gonna get to something that I was very interested in, and I don't know if I'm as interested now that I've seen it. So this is Axis. He's the first of our King's Glaive, and this is my least favorite one by far. I hate the self mill when he enters. That just seems so unnecessary. And then, so the only thing I like about his action ability is that it's that kind of effect, like you can block with him, and if he was going to die anyway, you then just purposely put him in there to get something back, which is really neat. I'll go into more of the King's Glaive as a whole once we get to Regis and Nyx, but just so far, obviously, I don't think you would ever play him unless you're trying to play King's Glaive.
Yeah, no, he's definitely a King's Glaive only card, but that being said, I actually think this is one of the better King's Glaive cards in the set. Yeah, so because I'm looking at him in the best possible way, which is he's 2 CP. He's 2 CP. When you play him off of with Regis in play, right? He mills you 3, which it's not. I don't consider that a downside at all because you're fueling your break zone for Nyx, and then if you play, like Moshri or whatever, you also fuel the like. I was playing Odin's with Odin Moshri with Kingslave, and that put Odin's in the break zone. So then my Odin in hand is cheaper, and then I also can remove them from play for Moshri and draw extra cards that way. And in that regard, he speeds up the game, but it actually is just a total plus to put extra cards in the break zone, in my opinion. And then if you can't target him because he'll just sack himself and float something back. So I think this is one of the better Kingslaves in my opinion. And this is maybe the only Kingslave that I would consider playing. The only forward Kingslave I would consider playing outside of Kingslave. Maybe there could be some kind of I really want to mill myself kind of strategy, and so that there could be something there, but I haven't seen that quite yet.
It's nice to hear a different take because I'm pretty self-mill. That's just not my style. So any card that does that, I'm like, I don't want this card. Get it out of here. So we got to continue the 15 love. Here we have Aranea, which is a card that, like, to me, maybe this goes in with that theme you'd mentioned earlier that they want you to play 2 copies of a card, because I think the other Aranea is so good in Dragoons. I don't think you could ever get rid of that one. But Dragoon decks, generally, they don't even have any EX bursts. I think they have King of Burmecia as the only one, so this gives them another Dragoon card. So is this a case where you just play both, or are you picking one over the other?
I think you play both. I don't think that there's any way that the Dragoons deck is ever giving up on a 0 CP forward, because this just says if you play Lightning, if you just play all Lightning cards, then this card is just free, right? It's just a 0 CP 3K. And I don't think Dragoons is ever going to be like, oh, I don't need any zero CP forwards. That's never going to happen. So I think this is definitely going in. The question is, like, do you take out any of the other Aranea, any copies of the other Aranea? Do you even play it at all? Yeah. I think you probably play between 1 and 3. I don't think there's a right answer there. Maybe the other Aranea is quite good, but you have to be on damage, and it's kind of hard to get the damage right now. So, maybe if slots are like really thin, then you could consider playing 1 or 2 of the other Aranea instead of the full 3. That being said, it's a high quality card. I don't think you're probably cutting it. You're probably just playing 3 of both and just taking the L on the name clash when it happens, and just saying, well, if I have one of the Araneas, it can attack, so it's okay.
Weird thing about this one's damage 3 effect is it actually only buffs Job Dragoon, so it doesn't actually help. Right? Like, was that an oversight, or was that intentional? It feels like an oversight, because most of the tribal stuff in this day and age cover both card and job name. So, but I don't know, maybe they specifically wanted that for some reason.
It's the secret Illuminati action against Dragoons, trying to keep them from being tier 1.
Are you saying there's someone out there trying to control our fate? Well, then we need a man who's going to wrest destiny back from the control of what are they called? Not the Vana. They call the Vana.
I don't remember.
Either way, it's Vayne. Definitely wasn't expecting this card. We've only seen him in Ice until now, but folks, Vayne is here, and I don't know if you've noticed, but he's been hitting the gym, so look out. When I first saw this,
he's a buff guy.
Right? Yeah, he's really built up. When I first saw this, I kind of just dismissed it. I was like, 8 costs. But the more I thought about it, so he could be another underdog. So here's the interesting thing. You can play him in any deck because you can completely eliminate his cost by removing 2 active forward or 2 active backups from the game, and then you can just play him for free. So you can kind of get around his color restriction like that. And then even though he's an 8K, he's not susceptible to Amaterasu because he doesn't actually have an auto ability. It's just a field effect. And while he's on the field, he basically says, kind of similar to Guy, that like you'll never lose in combat. My forwards will always be bigger than yours. It's like Rain's effect from Opus 8, except he doesn't have to swing for it. He's just, while I exist. So the more I thought about that, I was like, well, lightning forwards tend to be tinier. Like, you could play him for 4. Like, I've kind of come around on him. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of a, wow, this card's kind of annoying to deal with. So how do you feel about Vayne?
I'll start from the downsides and then talk about why I like it, because there's way more that I like about it than I don't like about it. But I do want to acknowledge that it's a combat-oriented card, and we're not playing a combat-oriented game kind of thing. So there is that. On the other hand, I think that this card is fantastic. Like, you can play it in so many different decks. You can play it in Chocobos. It's going to be fantastic in the mirror there. You can remove your fat Chocobo and then, get another fat Chocobo kind of thing. So it's gonna be great in Chocobos. I think it's playable in Monks. You can remove your Shantoto from the game and like a spent Kolka or whatever, and then refill with Monk backups. And the plus 2,000 power is going to be absolutely, fantastic in that deck. And in any deck that's building wide, the plus 2k, minus 2k is going to be great. Even if the minus 2k isn't amazing, you can still, plus 2k it. And the most annoying thing for this card is going to be the bounce is a thing. So I don't think this card is going to really shine. Well, Mashri is one of the most played cards in the format, but I think outside of those matchups, Vayne is going to be particularly potent, and I do expect to see him there. In addition, there are some backups being introduced that you would rather not be on the field anymore, which is we'll probably get to that a little bit later with Feolthanos. So you could view being able to get rid of your own backups as a potential upside for this card. That is how I feel about it with Shantoto and stuff as well. So I expect to see some of this card around. I don't know exactly how much weight I should put on it, but I think when this card is good, it will be pretty good, and it definitely has some use cases.
Awesome. Yeah, great addition to fair decks. Unlike this next card, which is a Sky Soldier, which is not very good, so we're just going to zip right past that to Odin. Odin. I don't know what to think about this one. Because there's already an Odin that breaks a 2 cost, right? And he's on a burst. Doesn't he draw you a card? But this one gets the other mode of that you could break a 4 cost, but only if you've received a point of damage. I don't know. It's hard for... If that other Odin didn't exist, maybe I'd like it better, but that other one just kind of makes me be I think I just want to play that Odin.
First of all, when you play Odin's, the magic number for lightning and stuff like that is between 12 and 15 for the most part. And so because of that, you had the EX Odin 5, the one that we got the full art of. Yeah. We had the 3-drop Odin that kills a 2-drop or less, draw a card. The 7-drop EX Odin, and then the 6-drop that gets cheaper. And then if you wanted to play more Odins, you kind of had to play bad Odins, right? You had to play the 3-drop one that kills a 3-drop, or the 4-drop one that kills a 4-drop or less. Those ones are pretty bad. So I think this immediately replaces those. So as the 13th, 14th, and 15th copies of Odin, this one is definitely in there. I also think that if you are only playing 12 Odins, it's kind of close, but I think this one slightly beats out the other Odin because, as it turns out, we just take damage a lot more now than we did before. It just kind of happens a lot more, and having the flexibility, breaking a cost 4 or less and being able to break the 2, and then also only costing the 1 card in your hand when you cast it. So very specifically against Sophie and Mashri and Mobius, these kinds of cards that you have to kill but you're not really happy about killing. Odin 3 didn't often cut it because they could bounce the card or remove it on the stack and then you wouldn't draw. But this one is always 2, so it's always just discard 1, do the thing. You always get it no questions asked. Always get to break it. And so in that regard, I think this one is a little more, there's less counterplay available to it. And so because of that, I think that this one is a little bit better. That being said, it's not it's not a godsend. We're not super happy about getting this card, but I think we definitely play it.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, next is a Thunder Drake. You mentioned earlier that was one of the monsters you liked, but we'll go ahead and move past these. They're all the same. Now we have Sonitus. Man, I don't remember any of these characters from the Kingsglaive movie. So this was a card that, again, so I'm just not really a self-damage guy. And to me, so don't get me wrong, the effect is good, but it also kind of bugs me because Luce already had this I'll indiscriminately break something, but then there's a downside. They get to draw a card. Now this one, there's the downside of deals you damage. I know some people love that, oh cool, deal myself point of damage, not a big deal. Obviously it means you couldn't use it on damage 6. But it already costs 2 lightning CP specifically, and another, and you have to dull them, and you lose a backup. I guess I just don't see it as wasn't that enough? Wasn't that enough of a payment to have him break a card? Why does he also have to deal you damage? So that's just not my style. I know a lot of people like this card because they like the self-damage.
Yeah, I think it could either be a downside or an upside. I think for Kingslave specifically, if you ever get to the point where this damage is making or breaking it for you, you're already done. The game's already over probably. And you're playing it in that deck anyways because it's going to be reduced by Regis, and you just need a critical mass of the Kingslave cards. Outside of Kingslave, maybe this is the one of, the whatever. You can use this to enable the Odin sometimes. It's like a little cute interaction maybe, and it could be one of the better utility lightning 2-drop backups. That being said, you're probably putting this in the deck or not putting this in the deck based on what deck you're playing, rather than like if the damage is important to you or if the break is important to you. So it's fine. It's just totally fine, I think.
So let's get more Kingsglaive. Here we have Tredd. I don't know why that name just makes me laugh. It's Tredd.
Yeah.
This one is much more Kingsglaive and 15 focused because his entry effect has to target a 15 character to do anything. 1k Brave on entry. He's really cheap. He's a cheap body, which I like. And I like his sack effect because, at least in my head, you'll always block with him. Say, yep, I'll block with Tredd, sack him off, power up this other guy to give him 3k first strike, which basically means combat's going to end at that point. Of course, these are all combat tricks. We've discussed this already, but yeah, I actually like this one. This one's definitely more my speed. How do you see Tredd?
Yeah, it's just, for me, it's just another Kingslave, and this one is 0 CP off of Regis. It's the only 1-drop Kingslave, so it's the only literally free card when you have Regis in play. It'll see play based on that alone. The effects are kind of like not as relevant as the fact that it's a 0 CP Kingslave, but yeah, they're serviceable enough. Kind of reminds me of Kites, the old one, but
yeah. Well, let's get to who's supposed to be their big buddy. Here we have Nyx. I always want to say Nyx Wotan for some reason. Nyx Ulrich. A beautiful art. I do love the art of this card, but I have to admit I'm not big on this card, and I'll kind of talk about the Kingsglaive package as a whole right now. So first of all, thank you for giving us different named Kingsglaive. I was like, man, they're just going to give us like another Luce and another Crow, and it's going to be, name Clash Central. But they delivered and actually gave us a bunch of new Kingsglaives, and I'm grateful for that. However, as a package, and I would love to be wrong about this, I just don't really see what the payoff for this is. Like, so here you have this Nyx. He can remove any of them from the game to give himself 1,000 in first strike, and then he dodges abilities, which is cool. He's sticky in that sense. He but it's only abilities. He can still get hit by summons. And then he has the big one where you can remove 5 of them to search out a 15 forward of cost 5 or less played onto the field. I think Regis was the card most people thought of, but then you can't use the other Regis. And beyond him, there's just not currently a big 15 payload card. Some people thought of Arden. I don't really see that. And just like, again, like the Regis and the Nyx, I guess my issue with both of these cards is that neither of them present like a threat that like, hey, if you don't get rid of me, I'm going to draw myself a ton of cards. I'm going to, I'm removing one of your forwards when I attack. And that's, I guess, I'm just like, okay, so what's the point of all this protection? Like they're just bodies. So to me, the only thing I really see saving them is that with the Regis reduction, with their, like, maybe because they're so cheap, you can, like, swarm the field, and so maybe just the sheer amount of them will make them dangerous, but I have to admit, I'm very disappointed in them. I don't see it, and I really hope I'm wrong.
It's just fine, that's it. Like, so for Nyx in particular, I agree that it doesn't really make sense that he protects himself, but then that takes away the fuel that makes him CP, that makes him a threat in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, like, you have to remove a Kingsglaive so that you can't use the bottom text, so that it's not a threat anyways. Like, so this Nyx doesn't particularly make sense to me, other than, like, we needed a staple piece that kind of, like, makes sure you always have Regis, basically. So that's kind of like how I'm thinking about it, is like, okay, we always have to have Regis. And then you just, I just play 6 Nyx, and it's been, it's been fine. I have never, like, resolved this card and been like, wow, Nyx is busted. It's been more like, whoo, barely scraped out of that one kind of thing. So I kind of feel like, maybe without some other target for this bottom ability that I'm not seeing, and Arden is not it. I don't think Arden is it, but I would also be glad to be wrong about that. We'll talk about that more with Arden, but I don't think Arden is it. If there is some other target for this that like looks really good and serves as a secondary boss monster for the deck, then maybe there's something here. Without it, they're not quite cheap enough to like really be excited about playing all of them in the deck, and they aren't quite quick enough to present the threat as like just damage. Like, I can just kill you is like not really something that these cards are quite able to do by themselves. So maybe we'll find the sweet spot with the Kingslave stuff. If not, it kind of just like falls short of being something that can keep up with in standard nowadays. Definitely gonna be quick enough in like an L3 or something like that though, considering these literally all came out in the same set. It'll be good for that kind of format, I think. But maybe not quite quick enough to keep up in standard just yet.
Moving on, Ninja, that's our backup CP generator or crystal generator. Next we have Noel, which is like, I don't know what it is about Noel, man. They always got to give him some janky cards. Like, and again, to be fair, this is actually, I think, one of the quote-unquote cleanest ones in that you basically can't block him. He's always going to win in combat, so it kind of reminds me of Bergen from Opus 9, but it's only when you block him. It's not when he blocks. So, like, it's just, I don't know, like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why they made Opus 1 Squall, but worse.
Yeah, right?
In Opus 15. So, yeah, this one's a dud. Not excited about picking up 3 of these foil for my title stuff.
Yeah.
But
you know what you should do? Dread it, run from it. Destiny still arrives. Dun 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 dun. Feolthanos has come. This is one of those cards that no one had spoiled beforehand, got revealed with the set, and everyone was like, well, what's this card? Lightning's got its own board wipe now, and it's thematic to Lightning, so it has to be active forwards. It does count your own forwards as well. It's going to break all of them, but you can set that up really well, similar to a Shantoto play. Kind of different from a Shantoto play where, you know, you swing in for combat at whatever they block or don't block, and then you just Shantoto the board away. Here, now if they don't block, you're actively protecting your forwards by turning them dull. Drop the Feolthanos, main phase 2, boom, wipe their board out. That's going to be his most common use, and then that damage 6 effect is kind of... I don't even know what to think of that thing. Like, it's kind of weird because, like, if they deal you to damage 6, they then have to not kill you, and you got to get to your turn, and you're going to lose all your backups, but then you're also breaking their entire boards. Like, crazy. It just... I'm excited for it. I'm excited for Feolthanos. He looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think this card is great. I think there's a lot of doomsaying about the card, like this card came too late, this card is not quite good enough. And I think one of the biggest gripes is against Chocobos in particular.
Yeah, Bismarck makes him look like a joke.
Yeah, Bismarck makes it. But I mean, how often are you ever winning a game where Chocobos plays Bismarck on turn 1 or 2? Yeah. Anyways, maybe Feolthanos wasn't really the deal breaker there, is kind of my thinking.
Yeah.
I also think that this is a nice like secondary option for decks that want to play like 3 Shantoto. Maybe you consider playing like 2 Shantoto and a 2 Feolthanos, and you can kind of up your count that way. Alternatively, there were decks that were like, okay, I have to be Earth because I need Shantoto, and maybe now they don't have to be Earth because they have access to Feolthanos. The damage 6, I think, is positive text, in my opinion. So I think people were like, oh, but this card is garbage. It breaks all of your own backups when you're dying. And I was like, well, that's not like really honest, right? It's like, it says like, instead of losing the game, you get one more try at winning the game, right? And I think this kind of brings me back to Vayne as well, where like, if breaking all of your backups would lose you the game, you can remove the Feolthanos. And if breaking all your backups is fine, you can remove the other backups so that Feolthanos isn't really much of a downside. And so I think that this card is basically all good text. It has not only does it clear really well in early game, but it clears. You can set up the clears so that they work in your favor in the mid and late game, and then it also has the damage 6 ability that is really strong. And I would be really surprised if this card wasn't like showing up and doing work sometime throughout the set, especially when it's so aggro out there right now.
Yeah. A great counter to the turn 1 Doga play. Doga, Sophie, Ursula. All right, Feolthanos, get him out of here. All right. More Kingsglaive action now. We've got Pelna. I don't know how relevant his action ability would be, but I do appreciate the fact that it's just dull. Put him in the break zone. There's no additional cost to that. And he can become completely free if you had Regis on the field first. Otherwise, you're just happy to put it down turn 1.
Yeah, it's nice to have all these breakable cards when you have the old Nyx on the field, because the old Nyx triggers whenever a Kingsglaive is sacked. Yes. So that all of the backups can sack themselves, which is really, really nice for helping close out games. So
now if you want some stinky doo-doo, we got the Magitek Armor. Like, I don't understand why this requires you to discard 2 cards, but yeah, okay, there you go. Common card. All right, next we have Ragelise. I'm not 100% sure how to say this. This is one you alluded to earlier, which is another one of your crystal generators. Damage 3 is going to get you a little extra something. Is this enough to make crystals interesting in Lightning?
Yeah, I think that's one of the better crystal generators in Lightning. I don't know how easy it is for you to get to damage 3 such that this card is passively generating the crystal when it comes in. But the at the end of your the one that generates a crystal if something's died at the end of each of your turns seems to be relatively consistent. From what I played with Setzer, at least, it seems to be relatively consistent. So, like playing effects that for cards that want to sack and kill themselves, so like Nyx, like Gilgamesh, like stuff like that, is going to make this better. And that also makes you want to play Regis, which brings you into Earth Lightning, which means you can use the crystals to play Robel-Akbel. So like, there's a lot of like synergy working there. Whether or not it actually comes out to be CP efficient enough to be worth playing, that's going to be something that just takes testing and time to figure out. But in terms of options, this is probably one of the better options to generate crystals.
Folks, do you like good art? I like good art. Hey, look at our girl Lilisette here. Never heard of this character, but cool little dancer tribal synergy. I can't honestly really even fully comprehend the amount of synergy this probably gives dancers, but anytime it just says, hey, dull these cards, and not the dull symbol, which requires haste, just the word dull, which lets you do it immediately. Yep. Unfortunately, it's in Lightning. Obviously that was on purpose, so I don't know how tricky that will be. Try to do a Lightning Wind Dancer deck, but there's clearly a lot of potential here, and man, the art just looks beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know. Did they just like put this in the wrong element or something? Like that's what we were all talking about it. Everybody's like, I don't know. Like, I think the idea here is that they had a dancer deck in mind, and Lilisette was a water card, and then they like made it, and they were like, oh my god, this is maybe too good, and then they just were like, okay, what if we just made her a lightning card instead, because her other form is lightning, so we might as well just make her a lightning card. And then they like totally neutered her by making her, so you basically have to play her off of Mayakov. There's like no other way to get to do it, because the other dancers are in water, including the standard unit backup, so you're just never going to be able to play this. Normally, you always have to play it off of Mayakov, and you have to play so you can use, this is a Mobius card, so you can use Echo to search for this in Water, and then Mayakov you can search with Merleweb, but there's no other way to search it, so you basically just have to hard draw these cards or play tutors specifically for them to get the combo to work, and then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, maybe they just remove the little set and then it just doesn't work anymore. I don't have high hopes for the dancers, but at least the potential on the actives are there. Like dealing 8k to all the active forwards, that looks pretty good when you get to dull all of them for the effect anyways. So
yeah, well, let's finish up on the Kingsglaives. Here's Regis. He's our battery, if you will. I love that he reduces all their costs by 1, and it can become 0. That's really cool. The damage 3 is like they just ran out of ideas. Like 1,000 power.
Yeah,
how is that like
more more text on the card?
Yeah,
sure,
exactly.
Right?
And so I know I kind of touched on Kingsglaive, but so you kind of brought up earlier. The Opus 11 Nyx was the payoff card, and having Nyx hit the field, putting Crow in the break zone, Crow got you a forward back, Nyx broke something, and you either got to dull something else or Nyx would go in for haste. Like, it felt good. It felt like a good payoff for losing a backup. And I don't feel like the new Nyx is better than the old one. And this Regis, okay, well, you're not playing the Earth Lightning Regis to bring off of the Nyx out. With this one, and just again, he's no threat. Yeah, he can protect himself, but and here's the other thing that drives me nuts about this. If you use his protection effect, it doesn't work with the other Kingsglaive's ability to put themselves in the break zone. You have to pick one or the other. Either you have to put them in for their effect, or you put them in for... So currently, Crow is the only one that, regardless of how she goes in, you're going to get her power. Crow is the one you want to sack for Regis's effect, because you'll still draw a card. Was that on purpose? Was that feels like such an oversight? How is it that the Opus 11 Kingsglaives feel like they were better designed than the Opus 15 ones? I'm just so disappointed, and yeah, again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope they play better than they seem, but Yeah, I'm just disappointed.
I think this Regis is good. First of all, if you're playing King Slaves, you obviously have to play it.
Yeah.
I've been playing with both Regises and both Nyxes because you really need both Nyxes, I think. And I was wrong. I was thinking that you couldn't play the old Nyx, but I think you actually need the old Nyx just for not only the volume, but for the sacking to make things happen is just better with the old Nyx. So if I was going to drop one of them, it would be the new one, to be honest. Like it's just worse than the old one at this point. So probably 3 of both, but there's that. And then for Regis, I've been playing 2 of the Earth Lightning Regis and 3 of this one because you just want to you want this one in your opening hand. It's the first card you want to put on the field. Then you can set up and start attacking and putting on pressure. And then eventually you don't need this Regis anymore, and then you want to have the old Regis to come in off of like Nyx and whatever. So, but yeah, I agree that King Slaves have kind of like seemed a little lackluster. I'm hoping that they kind of end up being a nice engine for something rather than like being their own deck, because as their own deck, I've just felt like I have like a bunch of cards that do nothing once they're on the field. So
yeah, that's fair. Well, let's look at our Lightning Legend. This is Lady Lilith. I gotta admit, I mean, maybe this is the best use of crystals we have, particularly that second effect that you can repeatedly choose a forward to cost 5 or less, break it. There's no restriction on that, so you could just do it over and over again. Looking at her in her best light, the remove of forward aspect is, again, very good defensively. They swing in, you block with a forward that wouldn't live anyway, so you stop the attack, then you just remove it from the game to get yourself a crystal. That being said, like, she's just a 2-cost, she's just a 5k body, so I just feel like if they're actually worried about your crystal generation, they're just going to take her out. They're not going to let you sit there and be like, well, I can't answer this Lilith. I'll just let them get, thousands of crystals. So I'm not high on this card at all. I would love to be wrong as usual, but I don't like this card.
At the beginning of spoiler season, when this card was revealed, and we were like, oh, 2 crystals to kill something. So like, how much CP is a crystal? Was like the question on everybody's mind. It's like, how much CP is a crystal really? Because you can get one off of playing a 2 CP backup. So like, if you consider that a crystal is at least 2 CP, I should say, at least 2 CP, then this card says pay 4 to choose a forward of cost 5 or less to break it. Would we really play that? If it says like, would we play it if that card just said 4, choose a cost a forward of cost 5 or less to break it? And I think the answer is just no, we just probably wouldn't. But then you also have to jump through all the hoops of converting all of the crystals. So like, if it just had 4 break whatever, and you did an infinite loop, and like there was somehow getting infinite crystals, then it makes sense. Or like if you could activate all your backups and then just tap them all and kill something, then we would probably play this card. But like the reality of the situation is like every single forward that's coming in now is 0 CP. 2 CP, whatever. There's some cards that like this effect is particularly good against because it's hard to remove them, like Ursula. You'd be happy to pay to like forward to kill an Ursula, or to kill a Stern or a Bismarck or something like that. But for most forwards in the game, you're not happy to pay 4 CP to kill them anymore. And as such, I actually think that this is one of the worst uses of crystals in the set. Like in terms of like good payoff cards for crystals, like Lena, Robel-Akbel, Setzer, Snow all outshine this card by a mile, in my opinion. I would be very happy to be wrong. I love to kill things. Like trading resources back and forth is like how I like to play the game, rather than just both players jam their head against each other by playing bigger and bigger boards. But I think just the way that it's set up, this card is destined to fail, I think.
The second action ability confuses me too. It's already restricted by crystals, which are a limited source of, and it's limited to lightning forwards. And yet it's like, no. You can only do it once per turn. Like, why? If I have 3 crystals and I bring in 3 brand new forwards, which remember, haste is only relevant the turn it comes in, why can't I spend those to haste them all out? Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah. Yep.
Another card I don't get, which is this Remora, in the sense that, what is this character? Is this a robot? The only Remora I knew was the big dinosaur-looking thing, the water summon.
The fish,
Yeah, right? So here's our crystal summon, and this seems to be a theme I'm discovering throughout this review. I think this is a great combat trick at 2 CP, because the idea is someone comes in, they have like a higher power than you block, then on the stack, you kill their 7k, and then you buff yourself up, so you get a 2-for-1. But I only think that's only interesting at 2, and that is a specific situation, and what have we said? Combat's not as relevant right now, so Would you do that for? You've been asking this the whole set. Would you do that for 2? Because I certainly am not doing it for 4. What do you think of Remora?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head there. I definitely wouldn't play this card in any situation, so yeah.
All right, well, that'll do it for lightning. Let's move on to water. So let's try a water summon with crystals. So from Remora, what about a Tomos? Totally misread this card. I thought it was just Famfrit, again, without the EX burst. But it's actually one-sided Famfrit. It only affects your opponent's board, not yours. Do you pay this for 3? Would you play it for 1? What do you feel about a Tomos?
I would play it for 3, and then also I don't have to play it for 3 because I have Yuna and Moshiri and these cards that reduce the cost of it to 2. So I think you can strip the crystal text away from this card and it's still good. Like you still just play it. You still play one-sided Famfrit. I think this card goes in Doga. I think it goes in like most water decks now. I think it's just this is an auto include. Basically, if you can play water summons, if you can reduce the cost to 2, you're especially happy to play it. You're definitely playing it at that point. And I think this is new auto include. This is how you're going to be killing your opponent's Rydia in Doga, I think, is with this card. So
interesting. I was wondering if because aggro is so prevalent right now, because Famfrit always was at his weakest when they had a big board, because again, they'll just choose their weakest forward. So I was curious if aggro might actually stop this card being effective, but you seem to think it'll be good regardless.
I think it's just going straight in.
Interesting. Yep. Okay, so what about our local Yeti who has shaken off his icy exterior and now I guess he went for a swim because we've got Umaro. Umaro always has to have some kind of effect to him. And, if you don't pay a crystal, he immediately dies and then gets you the crystal. Is that weird? That seems weird to me. Hey, you got to pay a crystal, but if you don't, he'll die and get you. Like, I don't know. Like, that just seems strange to me. I like the art, but the card itself...
I tried the card in like an ice water crystal deck. I didn't like it when you just played it and got a crystal, because then it's just worse than Gao, basically, because Gao just gives you the crystal. So you have to pay a crystal to keep him on the field, and then when he dies, he gives you the crystal back, kind of thing. I didn't like it when I did it that way either. It was just like, it was just a 1 CP 9k, and like, I didn't need a 1 CP 9k. Like, it didn't do anything for me. It wasn't particularly useful at blocking. It didn't do... Because we're not playing a combat game, right? Like, if it was a problem, my opponent just said, okay, bye, Moshiri, bye-bye. It's like, it's not a problem. Don't phrase it, like, whatever. So, I guess my question was, if you didn't have to pay a crystal, and it was just a 1 CP vanilla 9k, would it be good?
Probably not.
Probably not. I don't think, like, maybe it would be good just because you could play it off of 1 backup and buff your Sophie by 2, like, and be like a vanilla beater. But like with the crystal restriction, it's especially unplayable. I think this card is by far like the worst crystal generator in water, and maybe one of the worst uses of crystals for now. Maybe when you have like, if we have like 3 backups that are generating crystals and you can like play this on turn 2 consistently, then maybe it would be playable as just a blocker and, like a nice little Sophie buff and that kind of thing. But for now, it's just bad.
Yeah. So now we've got a Dancer backup. This card, I think, has a lot of interesting ideas just because, 1, it's a Dancer. So if you're trying to go for that tribal, you'll want it just for that. And 2, we've seen how strong Cuchulainn the Impure can be. Just the ability to blank abilities, and we're going to see that with a Legend coming up, is just very strong. So having another card that can do that just seems pretty powerful. And again, there's no extra cost. It's just dull and break it. So I think this is actually pretty solid.
Squeezed for backups. Maybe this is one of the better water breakables. And it's definitely playable on like L3, maybe L6 too, for backups. But I don't see like intentionally slotting this in like a standard deck unless you're playing Dancers. So
all right, well, get your Squid on, or Octopus in this case, because we've got Ultros coming up. He's a cool card. All the Ultroses are fun. I'm not I don't know, I guess I'm just not. You said earlier the theme was that they want you to play the same copies of these cards. And we now have enough Ultros that if you have the Opus 9 Legend out and you've got every other Ultros in the break zone, he's doing like 12k on swing to the board, which is incredible. However, you're now playing a bunch of copies of the same named card, and I've tried Ultros decks before, and they're fun. They're really fun, but your hand just gets junked up because, okay, well, I can only play one of these 5 cards I have. He's got a cool little effect, especially if you can bring him in from the deck, like... I just don't know. I don't know, but maybe you don't use him in an Ultros deck. Maybe you just... I don't know. How do you see Ultros?
Yeah, so I think for Ultros decks, this card is I mean, it's just as good as every other Ultras. You're definitely playing it in there, but that's kind of like the meme tier Friday night kitchen table synergy deck that like you want to do. So it's a little different. The real use for this, the competitive use for this card, I should say, is probably in Bart's Boko. Because when you party attack with the Bards, you can bring it out from the deck, and that'll trigger its ability. So you can, it's like a removal spell in Bart's Boko. And then if you ever get late enough into the game in Bart's Boko that you only have like 4 or 5 cards left in your deck, you can swing with the Ultros. If you have the Bards out, you can swing with the Ultros, deal a point of damage, and then use the action ability, put it back, and it comes back out active. So you can just keep swinging. So every time you discard a card, you can actually just deal as much damage as you want. So there's some niche uses there. But yeah, Burst Boko is basically the only place I see this being actually playable competitively. But there, it could be an easy, 1, 2, 3 of who's to say how many.
All right, here's Gao. What you see is what you get. He gets you a crystal. That's what you use him for.
Yep. I've found that he's often a 2CP 8K that gets a crystal. This is very solid. If you're going to play crystal decks, this is definitely going to be one of the best ways to get crystals.
Awesome. Next we have Keis as our backup. Definitely wants to be played in party decks. Party decks already have good water backups, such as Andoria. That'll draw you a card, so I'm not sure if you want to slot him in, if he's that worth it. What do you think about Keis?
I think he goes in basically all the party decks. How many is like a different question. I think, for Bart's Boko, he's literally he's a free backup, right? And then he untabs every time you party. So it's maybe not super relevant that the untapping part is maybe not quite as relevant. But coming in for free is nice. Works very well for Vikings, works very well for Bart's Boko. He is a North Stolen target. So there's that. But is it really going to change anything about Vikings fundamentally, or these party decks fundamentally? Well, no, it's just a nice little upgrade.
All right, next we've got Shrinryu Celestia, which is a neat card, but I wonder if this just needs too much of a build around. There's not really any Type 0 in water. There's certainly no cadets. I don't really know what other Type 0 even is in water, which you probably would want to get the full effect so that way, you're getting that 10K, but it's only on entry. I mean, I guess she could trade up in combat, but I don't know. There's a lot of text on this card, but I'm not sure it really does anything.
Yeah, so they got the Draco Knight, which is from the same Type 0 faction, and then when it dies, you get another Draco Knight and add it to your hand, right? So they want you to sack that, and that doesn't even cut it in limited. I think that's that's just bad in limited. I don't know why you would ever want to play this card in constructed, even in L3 or whatever. I don't think it's making the cut. Some people have mentioned that it's a 4CP minus 10K summon, if you think about it that way, because she can sack herself.
Yeah.
I don't think I would play it as a 4CP minus 10K. Would I play that card if it was a summon and it said I can only do it during my main phase?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, hell no. I think the card is just doomed. It's just bad from the get-go.
Here's Strago. Man, they always want to make him bounce cards. The fact that he draws is kind of the only thing that makes him appealing to me. I mean, but again, you're using crystals. How many crystals do you have to use with this Strago? And he's got to wait a whole turn before he can do it.
A mono water crystal deck that was swimming in crystals, because there's a way better payoff card for crystals that we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you're swimming in crystals, they're literally everywhere, and you really wanted that, it can maybe make it in the mono water because it has the balance synergy with Leviathan, but probably not. Working out.
There's the Draco Knight you mentioned. Maybe if we ever get more of him, he could be something interesting, but for now, it's just pack fodder. Pinello, so you've played some Sky Pirates. I'm going to mainly let you talk about this, because my only opinion on this, it's obviously a good card. Finally, she has job Sky Pirate. The only question is, is it worth losing the backup Pinellos for this?
Yeah, so I've been using Merlewib to search for the van. You just basically just jam 3 Merlewib in the deck, and that's been perfectly fine for me. So losing the Pinello backup is not ideal, but possible, right? And I think that if that opens up the window to use this Pinello, it's well worth it. I've played maybe 5 or 6 games with Pinello, and I'd say on average I drew about 3 cards per game with this before my opponent just scooped or the game ended. It's been really, really great. You get 2, so you have. If you think about getting it out with Vaughn, you basically want to get it out after you have 2 Sky Pirate backups. So you'll have the 2 Sky Pirates and Vaughn so that it costs 2, and then you can just draw cards. You can convert your CP into cards every turn. And then once you get, if you like have a Kites, and then Kites is like blanking stuff out, you start drawing cards for 1. Once you have once you have all 3 Sky Pirate backups with the Fran, Tamaj, and Philo, and you'll have Avon. Any Sky Pirate is enough to start making you draw cards for 0. So yeah, it gets out of hand really, really fast. Like the deck goes from 0 to 60 in about 3 turns. Like it's like you play 2 backups. It looks very innocent, right? You play 2 backups, then you play Vaughn, and then like if the Vaughn gets muned or kitesed, then all of a sudden you're just like drawing cards every turn for 0. Like on turn 3, it gets really, really out of hand really, really fast. So this card is definitely incredibly powerful and definitely something that Sky Pirate is needed to keep up in the current meta.
Disgusting. Moving on, we have Hilda, which was my spoiler. Which, if you haven't seen, if you've seen my video, you know I had to put all my emotion into it.
It was great.
Thank you, I appreciate that. But yeah, the first thing I thought when I saw this card was like, oh, it's Gramps, just better, and not to be overlooked. Look at that job; it's a princess, so you can search this out. I actually did see a few people play Gramps with certain Sophie decks just because they wanted a backup that drew and it has a burst. Do you think she makes the cut in today's game?
In Opus 13, Agrias was like one of the huge selling points of like water, and I've never seen a card fall off quite as fast as Agrias. Right now, water, especially in like mono, is kind of struggling to find a backup that it actually wants to play that is Sarah's searchable. It sounds crazy, right? But like you don't actually want to play Princess Sarah in like mono water just because you need something to search with Sarah, and you don't really want to play Ovelia. You don't really want to play like Claudie or like any of these cards that just don't do anything basically. So I actually think Hilda is maybe one of the better options to just have like a water backup that you can search with Sarah in color. This is probably one of the better ones. It's got a nice EX if it stays in the deck, so it's just not a dead card later. Occasionally, maybe you'll get the damage 5 ability off. It could be nice in those cases. So yeah, I actually think this card probably sees play at least once or twice over the next few sets.
In the past, I wasn't too big on backups that had enter the field effects related to damage, because again, it's like, well, I want to get my backups out early. However, again, with aggro being as prevalent, it's like, well, sometimes I'm on damage 5 on turn 2, so maybe I'll get it off more than I think I will.
That's true too, yeah.
All right, so then we have Blue Drake. That was a monster. We'll go ahead and move past that one. Here's our legend. It's Porum, and I just gotta say it right off the bat. Again, I kind of mentioned it's just kind of laughable how Porum always gets a way better card than Palom, and I'm sure you'll mention this, just like because they both have the same first 2 lines of text. They're gonna get stronger as they get this experience counters. The key difference is that Palom is kind of worthless until he gets 3 counters. Porum is not worthless at all. Again, that blank effect is very strong, so the fact that at minimum, you can just go, no, I'm just going to blank your most dangerous things. Is like, huh? And then if you get to the 3, and then now you can just shrink it out of... like, I hadn't even considered this, but James Greaves said this to me. Like, this card can permanently turn off Sophie. Like, literally every turn. Sophie has no abilities. Sophie has no abilities. Sophie has no abilities.
Yep.
What? Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this card is being criminally underrated by a lot of players. I was like... So I read this card and I was like, oh, this card sucks. And then I was like, but wait, 5 or less. That's like every card in the game right now. It's basically only ever not blanking like what, Garuda, Doga, and like Leviathan or something like that. It's like there's like a few niche cards that it can't blank, but it basically blanks everything in the game. You don't really need the experience counters for it to be useful. And when you do get the experience counters, it just becomes a better version of the same card, basically. It's just like, and it'll be a 6k at that, or a 7k at that point. So like it can continue growing, so your opponent really, really has to kill it. And it's difficult to kill cards like this right now. Like your options are Bismarck, Stern, bounce it with Matri, and or like use like a removal summon on it or whatever, right? Like there's just not a whole lot of options to kill these really annoying, efficient 2-drops, and this is falling right into that niche. And, it's a Lena target. It's also a target for the new Lena. It's Leonara. It's pumping your Rydia. I'm planning on playing this in Doga because it's going to be absolutely incredible in the mirrors to turn off Sophie.
Yeah.
And I think the big thing is there's no auto ability or whatever. You can just play this on your turn and say, okay, I want to turn off Mashri. If you want to do anything, you got to do it right now. Your opponent doesn't get to hold up Mashri for these really niche stack interactions. There's no more stack chicken. It says I win stack chicken. That's what it says on the card. And I think that is really invaluable right now. And I think that is being underrated by a lot. It's for me, it's mostly Bismarck, Stern, Mashri, Sophie. These are the juicy or Rydia, your opponent's Rydia. These are the juicy targets. And it's God, this card is so annoying. I know for a fact that when I'm playing against this card, it's going to feel so annoying. I can't do anything. And I understand some of that. It's a 2 CP that doesn't really that doesn't generate CP value. But I think the utility is just so high on this card that it's great.
Yep, 100% agree. So another card. This is a card that when it first came out, I felt like no one really said much about it, but I was immediately what is this? This is Mind Flayer. So even if you couldn't cast the card, just the fact that you get to remove one of their cards from the game is just good gravy. But the fact that you can then just cast it, it just as if it's yours. You can just now I see the downside. So it's basically like Lonnie on a summon, right? And I've been on the good end and the bad end of Lonnie. And the bad end of Lonnie is when I play Lonnie and I steal my opponent's crappy backup that searches a card I don't have. And then the good end is what my opponents do when they steal my Amaterasu and cast it for 1 CP, or one of my other great cards. God, what did someone steal the other day? I think I was playing the Avalanche, and I don't remember what they stole. Oh, I was playing, Ice Lightning Turks, and they stole my Zero Miss. I was like, you're kidding me? So I do understand there's a natural high rolliness to this card that what if you don't get anything good? But man, I don't know. I don't want to face it.
Yeah, I was not super high on this card when it was revealed because I was okay, when am I ever going to want to pay 4 to gamble on getting something? What I didn't take into account at the time was that we would be casting it for 0 off of Rydia and Doga and Minwoo and these kinds of cards. And I was oh, well, I would play this card if it costs 0.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think that's kind of the reality of the situation is you're never going to see this card cast for 4 as a fair kind of Lonnie kind of thing. You're going to see this card cast for 2 off of Yuna and Mashri. You're going to see this card cast for 1 with Mashri's active ability. You're going to see this card cost for 0 off of Doga, Minwoo, and Rydia. And that's why this card is going to be good, I think.
All right, well, let's get back to dancing. We've got Mayakov here. Great artwork. And then here's Dancers now. We saw Wind, Lightning. Here's our big Dancer payoff, but it's in water. He's a cool card. And again, I want to see what the Tribal can do, but man, is the 3-color just going to hold it back too much? I wonder if it will.
Well, I think it's going to be Wind, Water, and then you just never get to play the Lilisette. It's the only Lightning card in your deck. Yeah. I think that's kind of how it's going to end up going because there's just no other Lightning Dancers in the first place. So I think that's where that's going. And then the card itself is great. It's got the flexibility of playing a forward or a backup, the job or the card name, and then not being chosen, giving everything the Shroud, not being chosen by abilities is really, really great. And I think that's part of the draw of Dancers here. Is that going to be enough to save the archetype? Yeah, I don't know about that. We'll have to see.
Well, let's get to our next water legend, who I was so happy to see this card was a legend. Saw the great amount of artwork. I was like, oh, it's Mog. Mog was one of my favorite characters from 6, especially as a kid, because I'm he's so cute, he's a little bogle. And I was like, wait a minute, what's the text of this card? And I took a deep breath and I read the text. And it's funny because James Grease said to me, I don't know why you bothered to read it. Every Mog card is a 400-page essay that says draw 2 cards. Discard 2.
Yeah.
And he's kind of right. So, you've got your crystal effect to do the draw 2 discard. Then you've got this big wall of text that if you just draw your deck into oblivion, he gets some pretty cool effects, but I don't know, how often are you going to draw 6 cards in a turn? It does count the cards you draw as part of your draw phase, but and then of course he's just a special that draws. So I love the art, he's a cute card, but like all the Mogs, he just feels so niche and specific.
I went full 180 on this card. I was like, okay, so Yeah, well, I guess I should even say I went 360 on this card. I was like, okay, I'm not happy about it, but we have to play this with the crystal stuff because it's a crystal consumer. And then I was like, okay, maybe this card sucks. And then I took it out in the builds because it was like taking up so much space. And I thought like, well, the crystal converting into CP isn't going to be that good. And then I went all the way back around and I was like, actually, I think this is one of the better ways to use crystals because it's so cheap. It's so drawing cards is so universally good that while you're not particularly excited to just use a crystal to draw 2 and discard 2, just being able to have that immediate way to derive value from your crystals, like on turn 1, if you want to, it's just really, really strong. So like, if your opponent goes turn 1 Doga and they don't have a nice follow-up play, you can just play Oracle, get a crystal, and then Mog, draw 2 cards, discard a card, and then bounce their Doga. And it costs you nothing, like because it's you'll have drawn 4 cards. And so in that regard, the card just says draw 2, discard 2, and then at the end of your turn, if you played the card this turn, or if you drew cards with the S ability afterwards or whatever, just immediately bounce something. And I think that's just really, really solid. I think it's been really good for me. The S ability is obviously fantastic. It just says draw 2 cards. Like it's just great. So I've been able to turn like Cait Sith and like extra copies of himself that I've drawn by drawing so much of my deck so quickly into more cards, and it's just been really good in that regard. And I actually think this is probably one of the best ways to use crystals right now. So I've gone all the way around on this card, and I think it's probably here to stay. I have an earth water version of the deck. I have an ice water version of the deck. This guy is really, really good for buffing Sophie. He's just a 0 CP 5k that kind of takes back some of the board. Yeah. So it's great with Gao. It's great for Sophie. It comes in off of Lena. It's really cheap. It's just been all around great for me, I think.
All right. There's the Oracle. That's your backup generator for water CP for your crystal. And then here we have Realm. Man, I love this art. I hadn't actually never seen this in mono art before. It's gorgeous. So again, we're playing the crystal game, and you're going to need a lot of crystals if you want to repeatedly use her monster effect. We already have a very good monster realm from Opus 11 that's more quote-unquote consistent just because it doesn't have this whole crystal mechanic tied to it. However, you do have basically a repeated way to get crystals. God, all the crystal cards are so hard for me to judge. How do you see Realm?
I only went 180 on this one, so I thought like this card sucked, and then I thought it was playable. So like I thought this card sucked because it was just like, okay, I need a way to bounce my own stuff. That's the only use for this card. And I thought like generating a crystal, if a crystal is 2 CP, maybe it's playable, but then it's only 2 CP when you actually spend it, and then monster sucks, so the realm isn't really doing that much. I think the best part about this card is that it works really well with the Lena, which we'll probably get into in the next couple of cards. But for now, I think that this card is kind of on hold. It's probably great when you want the bounce effects. So like if you're wanting to bounce your own like Typhon or your own whatever for Bismarck and Locke and Leviathan and stuff like that, that's when the card is going to be really good. I think like just as a generic crystal generator, it's probably not great.
Next, we've got Lady Lunafreya hitting her third one. Normally when a card says it can't attack or block, I'm like, oh, why would I want to play that? However, you can circumvent that by playing Noctis. And in particular, not only does she have a good body, she's got a pretty nice, basically, magnet effect that just says, hey, I'm going to make sure something can't be targeted. I'm going to completely protect it. So I actually like this a lot. It's obviously really good with the light party Noctis or any of the Noctises you choose because it eliminates her downside. But if you put this in any 15 deck, the fact that anytime you can force your opponent to have to deal with a 1 CP body, 1 cost body that says, no, you got to waste removal on me first because I'm keeping this thing alive. That's got to have potential, right? I think she looks great.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think if you play a 15 deck at all, this probably goes in it. The only exception maybe being Kingslaves. Who knows what element combination Kingslaves comes in. But if you can play Lunafreya in the deck, you definitely will. I have played it in Bart's Boko. That's the first place that I played it. So 1-drop comes out, and Noctis is obviously fantastic for that deck. So it's just a fantastic fit. It gets haste from the Barts because when you have the Noctis out, so you Bart's Boko Noctis, you swing in, you get the card, you get Lunafreya. Then Lunafreya protects a Noctis. You've drawn a card off Noctis. Then when Boko hits, you draw another card. Somehow, like you end the turn with like 2 cards in hand and like 4 things on field. You can't choose the Noctis. It's like it's very like, how did I get here? Yeah. Like so quickly, kind of thing.
So here we have Lena. Here is one of your big payoffs for crystals. I didn't remember this card at first, and the reason because I saw the crystals and I kind of read it. I was like, well, whatever. However, rethinking about it, I didn't quite realize that it's actually 2 separate auto abilities, and they both trigger when she enters. So if you have 3 crystals to pay, you can pay all 3 crystals, and you get a 2 cost, and you get a 3 cost. I definitely overlooked that at first. Is this our best use of crystals?
Yep, I think this is definitely the best use of, the most powerful use of crystals, I should say. Like, the most consistent ones are, like, Robel and Mog 6 and, like, Setzer and Snow. Those are probably the most consistent ways to derive value. But Lena is definitely the most powerful. Turning 1 crystal into Sarah Mobius, into Sophie, into Mog, into Gao. These are all, like... So if you turn it into Gao, it just immediately buys the crystal back. If you turn it into Sarah Mobius, you get to draw a card. So you paid 1 crystal... You got a 0 CP 5k, and you drew a card. It's like obscene, like obviously great with Sophie, great with all these cards. Paying 2 for a 3 is a little more difficult to evaluate. I haven't found like a ton of particularly obscene uses for that part of the ability. The best one that I've done so far is like the one that it seems like they want you to do, which is you play Lena, and then you pay all 3 crystals, and then you get Gao and Realm, and then the Realm bounces the Lena. So you get 2 crystals, 1 from the Gao. Yeah, you get 1 from the Gao, 1 from the Realm, and then you get 2 crystals back. So then you can replay the Lena, and then if you had another crystal, you could then get 2 more things. So it's like you can turn like 3 to 4 crystals into like 5 forwards pretty easily with Lena alone. And so that's probably the most powerful thing to be doing with crystals right now. That being said, getting 3 to 4 crystals right now is, very, very difficult. Yeah. Like, generally, you're going to spend more of them than... You're going to want to spend more of them to stay in the game before you're able to pull off something like that. But, when you can make that move, it's going to be insanely powerful. It's going to be very, very resilient. In terms of, like, whether you play this Lena or the old Lena, well, if you don't have crystals, you're obviously not able to play this Lena, so you're going to play the old one. But when you do have crystals, I think it just completely overtakes the old Lena. It's just a complete strict upgrade because it's a 3-drop doing the same thing that the 5-drop did. And you can also go out of element with this this Lena. So you can get like Rydia, you can get those kinds of things, and that's gonna be, you can get Mashre for what it's worth. You can get Light and Dark with this too. So this card is definitely really, really strong, and I would expect to see more of it going forward.
Yeah, you sold me on it, sir. Awesome. Well, folks, that is our main 6 elements. We've wrapped up here with water. That means there's only 2 elements left to talk about, which is Light and Dark, and then we'll cover the starters cards that came in the Avalanche set. That will be in our final video, and we'll wrap up our thoughts on Opus 15. Until then, Jared, thanks for being here. Always happy to have you. We'll see you in part 3. Take care.